Welcome to the Glide Agency podcast. I'm your host, Nellie Ruffett. I'm General Manager at Glide Agency. And on this episode, I'm sitting down with Natalie Jenkins of Block Branding, and we'll be talking about working as a designer in a creative agency. Hi, Natalie.
Hello, Nellie. Thank you for having me at your beautiful building and your beautiful agency. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. We're really happy to have you.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I got to come with a little confession. This is my very first podcast, and it's actually my second filmed interview ever.
Wow.
So I'm very honored to have you. The very first one, completely different, was for French national television 22 years ago, interviewing Ricky Martin.
Oh, well.
Very different. And that is probably more testament to my age than it is to my skills. So hopefully everything goes well and you'll be gentle with me.
Well, I think that's fabulous. And if that was your first interview, I think that's amazing. And I'm very honoured to be here for your second and your first Glide podcast.
Thank you. So before we get really started, I'll probably read a bit of a bio about you so the viewers know who you are.
Yep.
So Natalie is the CEO of Block Branding. She has over 30 years experience as a leader in the creative industries across Australia, including the arts and culture sector. Nat ran her own strategic advisory consultancy for 8 years, working with the corporate sector on developing their ESG programs, and has been a sessional academic in the arts management degree at Edith Cowan University since 2007. Prior to coming to Block, Natalie worked client-side and was one of Block's clients, funnily, as co-CEO and executive director of Black Swan State Theatre Company. In her spare time, I'm actually surprised you've got any.
Lots of late nights.
Natalie contributes at governance level to many not-for-profit and arts organisations. She's currently chair of CISO magazine, deputy chair of Regional Arts Australia, and a board member of Future Now, Creative and Leisure Industries Training Council. And in 2021, together with a cohort of independent agency leaders, she helped establish InWA, an advocacy group for Western Australian independent agencies, which she currently chairs. Impressive.
Even I'm exhausted just listening to that.
Very impressive career.
Thank you.
Obviously, all those years in creative industries in different shape and form, but first time really with Block working in an agency as such.
In an agency and also in the commercial side of the creative industry. So previously I've been in the not-for-profit and side of things across, a huge array of different cultural organisations, but first time in the commercial end, which is interesting and exciting.
So what is it that you love about working in creative agencies specifically?
It's about being around creative people. I think it's that energy of creative people that I've always enjoyed, and that's always what's drawn me into the arts sector. So, and people working in creative agencies are artists, they're commercial artists, and they have the same way of thinking and the same way of approaching, and I find that very inspiring. I love being around creative people, and I feel very lucky to be around creative people every single day. And the fact that we are using that creativity to create better businesses for our clients, and knowing that they get to use that creativity in their businesses is also a pretty good feeling.
Yes, I bet. So in your view, really creative agencies are not so much about raw creativity rather than business ideation, I guess, as in, using creativity to embrace business ideas and reflect that.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing about, we are unashamedly at Block about businesses doing better business, and that, that it is about a business and sustaining a business and making those creative ideas work for the business and keep that business profitable. So it's the application of creative ideas and creativity in visual form, but also in thinking, that a commercial business is then able to use. And it's not always a commercial business. We work with government, we work with not-for-profit and community organisations. Whatever the organisation is, it is furthering their business and making their business work.
Yes, of course.
Using creativity as the core from what we do.
Yes, to achieve their goals, whatever their goals are, really.
Yeah, through the brand, which is primarily what we're focused on. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think, well, now that you really are working in a creative agency, you probably had your ideas as well of what a creative agency would be about. What do you think are the common misconceptions about creative agencies?
That we're always at long lunches.
Oh, we wish.
We wish. I mean, I think there were the days when that was the case, and it's been a feature of the industry, and we do love a good lunch in this sector, and that's both for clients but also for the team to celebrate. It's funny because I've always been in the nighttime economy, working in the arts sector and in the theatre, which is nighttime. So you say the same thing in that you have late nights. There's lots of things that happen in the evening. But yeah, the perception that everyone's always out at long boozy lunches, I suppose, is not necessarily true, and not true. There's the odd, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
People work pretty hard. But I think the other misconception that is important to break down, and particularly on the topic we're discussing today, is that there is a bit of a feeling that particularly young creatives are working really, really long hours, or always working on this deadline, which means that they're, working long hours, and it's constantly like that. And there are some agencies like that. That is absolutely true, and there's lots of industries like that. But in our part of the world, in a branding agency, it's not always like that. There are times when the load is heavy and you've got a big deadline or a client project that people will be working long hours, but it's definitely not like that. That's probably the exception and the norm. It's really important, that balance for work.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of agencies globally even have tried to create that balance by creating like super fun, super vibrant environment, with football, the football and people riding bikes around the office and stuff like that. And for me, it's one of the misconceptions we come across quite often, is that perception that it's going to be super vibrant. Sure, it is probably more vibrant than a very traditional, very, on the clock type of industry.
Yes.
But it really comes down to the cultural DNA of the agency itself and the people who are in there, which reflects on the culture. But you might have some very vibrant ones. You might have, as you said, some that have really long hours, constantly working and pushing through. Ours, as an example, is more a team of introverted people. The majority of them introverted, so it's not constantly, shouting across the room.
Exactly.
So it's all very different, and I think it comes down to investigating which agency you are dealing with or about to deal with, to get a feel of what that one is going to be about.
Exactly, and that's what you want when you're recruiting people to come and work for you. And in our agency, we have a lot of really introverted people and a lot of really extroverted people, and you have to manage that on a day-to-day basis. But that doesn't mean that people are shouting, as you said. There is lots of energy, and then there are times when it's very quiet. But I think that it's important with creative people that you would give them space to be creative. So if you're working with them very long hours all the time, that's not going to necessarily fit. And so that is a misconception, I think. But there are certainly places where that would happen more so than others. And there are times when you have to, but it's not the norm.
No, of course. And you're talking about, adapting to different personalities as well. Do you find some common challenges, I guess, working with creative people specifically?
Look, I wouldn't say it's a challenge, but it's a feature of, and something you have to be able to understand and identify and work with, is that creative people are by nature often very sensitive people, and that is, they're big thinkers. They're big thinkers, and they think, and they're unpick, and they're challenging, and they're thinking about the world, and they're usually very empathetic people, and they feel very greatly. And I think you have to be really aware of that when you're working with those people. I don't find that a challenge, because it's second nature to me, having worked around artists my whole life, or my whole career. But you do have to be aware of that if you're managing people, what sort of environment they need, what they're going to thrive in, how you work with them and nurture that, because that's a fantastic thing for a creative person. You wouldn't want to see that go. But it's important to be very aware of that and to work with that. I think if you weren't recognising that, it would be challenging for everybody. It's a great thing, I think. It's a beautiful thing about creative people. And you just have to know and recognise and work with that and nurture it too.
I agree. Emotional intelligence is something you need in any sort of leadership position anywhere, and when you lead any type of people. But obviously, in a context of creative people, as you mentioned, the high sensitivity, which is a massive blessing when it comes to, tapping into what's not there yet and bringing it to life and coming up with new concepts and anticipating trends and all of that. Absolutely beautiful, but it's like any tools, it's got its downsides as well. And very often I've noticed that, creative people tend to be very emotionally attached to what they produce and their idea and all of that. And that can be a bit brutal for them being in a commercial context where you're judged. I mean, you're not judged, but your baby is being judged based on whatever results it's delivering or not. And I think it's important as an agency to try to create an environment where, sure, you nurture that high sensitivity and you create a safe place where it can be expressed, but at the same time you also need to bring back in the context that it's still a commercial endeavor.
That's right.
And over time I think a designer has to learn to detach themselves a little bit emotionally from what they put out there.
Definitely.
It's a journey.
I think you're absolutely spot on there. You have to be able to cultivate resilience as well. And I mean, one of the things that I read sort of fairly early on coming into this job, which struck a chord with me, because again, it's the same as performers when they're on stage, or visual artists who put their work on in whatever medium, they are constantly facing criticism. And I read an article that talked about, it was actually a national survey around mental health of people working in creative agencies, particularly creative people, which we do know the stats are higher, and that is amongst creative people generally. So again, as leaders, we have to be very aware of that. What can we do to support? But particularly with designers and creators, there was the headline was, you have to be able to constantly face rejection.
Yes.
And that's hard.
It is very hard for anyone in general. But when you're emotionally invested, when you're given everything that you strongly believe in, and then all of a sudden turn around and say, well, actually, that ad, it looks great, but it really is not driving the results we're trying to get. You need to take a step back, breathe, and don't perceive it as I'm being personally attacked.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's taking out the personal from it, understanding the business context in which that work that you produced is going to exist, and that it's not personal to it being your creative expression of yourself. I think that's very important. So that is that building that resilience, building some structures around the creative team as to how they can deal with that why, and depersonalising it is really important.
Yes, and for us being in the digital space as a digital agency, everything we do is sort of backed up with data and analytics.
Yes.
And analytics don't lie. So when an ad is not performing, we're able to say so. And it's never some sort of a subjective opinion. It's actually, well, look, this is not working, and this one doesn't look as pretty, but it is working. And it's quite interesting because I think in a way it is probably not necessarily empowering, but a little bit safer because that data is objective.
It is.
There's no judgments there.
No, I think that's a very interesting point, because in the kind of branding world that we're in, and other creative work, it shouldn't be, but often it can be subjective. And so when an idea is put forward and it's carried through by our team, and we know through experience and everything that we've looked at, because the work that we do is fundamentally grounded in strategy, and a lot of research and a lot of data and insights have gone into that. When we present something and then it's a subjective view that comes back, and it comes down to like or dislike, or I don't personally like that colour, or that font doesn't speak to me, that's actually really hard to deal with. And you see that we work with a lot of founders of businesses, and so it's their business, and a lot of it becomes about their like and dislike. Not only founders, you can see that with marketing managers as well. But there's often a group of another cohort that they're talking to, so that is hard because it is subjective.
Yes, well, we have the same thing as well, with founders and marketing managers. And again, data is helping us because it reframes everything, and we're able to say to anyone who could be too emotionally invested, whether on a production level or on a recipient level, that, this is just what it is. This is working, this is not. And we have to do more of what's working.
Yes, that's right. And so the research is a really important part of it, and we would love it if everyone had that opportunity to back up with research the decisions that are being made.
Absolutely. We talked about the challenges, which are great, but there are also lots of beautiful, beautiful things. What are the main attributes you're looking for in a designer when you're looking at hiring, whether it's a emerging designer, someone new, just coming,
Yeah.
just straight from being graduated,
Yeah.
or someone more experienced.
Yeah.
What is it that stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, being a big thinker is probably the big thing, because our world is about ideas. We trade in ideas. Ideas are what back up everything that we do. You see it expressed visually, but it's the ideas that back it up. I mean, as a strategic branding agency, what we always say to clients is, before you see anything visual, you're going to talk to our strategists. You're going to go through a brand strategy process, which is backed by data and insights and research, and then that connects with the creative brief that guides the creative team. So that generation of ideas is really important. Big thinkers, people that question, that don't just accept the status quo, that think about things. That's really important. Obviously, creativity and talent is really important, because those two go together hand in hand. I think the ability to understand and empathise with the world is really critical, and having a level of understanding, well, not a level, a big understanding of human beings and what drives them is important. And what we like to see is people, personally at Block, people who are engaged in the world as well, that are engaged in things outside of their work or their own little sphere. So we will look at the whole person, to see what they're engaging in, what their likes are, what they understand with different parts of the world, because we work across all different business sectors. So that broad view is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a common thread in marketing and advertising in general, where, because we're representing different businesses, we need to have that. But even more generally, we live in a society, we live in a culture. There are trends, there are matters, emerging matters. There's a variety of things that will be reflected in communication style, that will be reflected in the next product or next services that we will need. So as marketers and advertisers, on all aspects of marketing and advertising, you need to have an understanding of that, or at least perceive it, a perception of that, to be able to translate that in whatever you create and whatever you come up with. It's very important to have that sense of connection with the wider world out there.
That's right.
And an interest to be part of it, and sometimes even steer it in a certain direction.
Absolutely. And I think if you can't expect everybody, particularly when they're kind of emerging into the world, to have experience with a hugely broad range, but you want them to be the type of person who goes, I'll go and learn about that. Sure, I don't know anything about that sector, but I'm going to go and learn about it. I'm going to go and find out about it. So it's that quest for learning is really important. At a meeting I was at yesterday, or strategy day, around the future of work and skills for workplaces, we were talking about with creative sector people, it's that wonderment, having wonder. And I think that's a word that we don't use often anymore, but I love it. It's about, I wonder, I want to think, I want to ask, I am curious. So wonderment as a concept, I'm going to use it a lot now. I love it. I think that's, what I want to see in everyone. They're people who wonder.
It's a strong word.
It's a very strong word. It's a very strong word.
And I think I can relate, because, again, digital, super fast-paced, technology is always changing. You have to constantly keep changing and evolving, and keep your finger on the pulse.
That's true.
Because otherwise you miss out. So for us, a designer, with all the points that you've made, validate all of that, but we also need people who are fast learners, as you said, and keen to embrace technology. It's brilliant to be creative. It's amazing, but you have to be tech savvy to a certain extent. There's always new tools that are going to make you able to create even more or even better in a different ways. So it's very important to stay attuned to that.
It is. It totally is. Again, at this strategy day that I was at yesterday for one of the boards that I sit on, which is all about workplace development and planning, and what's happening. The National Skills Commission, which did a big research report in 2021 to look at what are the skills that employees for the future need, and data and technology is one of the fastest emerging skills, and we obviously saw that completely accelerated during COVID, and the tech industry cannot keep up at the moment. There is massive skill gaps, but it is the fastest growing need. So I think that we have to have it every day as human beings interacting in society now, but in the workplace it is a critical skill these days.
Absolutely. And the advertising world, marketing world is obviously no different. And I mean, you can see that, you know, the amount of space that digital is now taking in the marketing and advertising, where I mean, we spend more time on a phone or on a screen that we do, on paper, really realistically. And the volume of ads we are bombarded with, or communication in general, we are bombarded with. And I think it's important that designers, because it's so central to that, understand that you need to create for digital.
Yes.
Not just create broadly, but for digital. There's different platforms, different channels. That means different size. How do you adjust your brand to all these different formats? And it's quite interesting because it creates new challenges from a design perspective.
It does,
Which is different, but quite welcome.
Yes, that's right. And it gives an opportunity for people to learn more and think more and also update their skills as well.
And push boundaries, going back to that.
And I think that's a great thing.
It is.
Yeah.
On that note, my personal experience is that a lot of fresh designers are coming with, we talked about misconception and all of that, and they're coming with a lot of ideas from TAFE and uni and everything, obviously never had experience in a workplace. When they arrive or they've been in for a few months, what do you think they need to improve the most on when starting to work in an agency, from your experience?
I think for a lot of people, it's understanding how an agency works. If you're coming straight out of your university or training course, whatever you've done, you do get to do group assignments and all of those sorts of things that we know, that universities encourage you to do to reflect what will happen when you're in the workplace. But it's still pretty much a solo pursuit that you're on, because it's about your career and your decisions and your life. So I think actually then I'm now part of a team in an agency is really a critical thing, to understand that lots of people, certainly in our agency, will input into your work. It's not just you start on this and you finish there. Other people will refine it and change it and collaborate on it. The client will also do that, so your work might shift quite a bit. So working within that team and that collaborative framework is really important, and a big thing to learn. And I think you talked about it before, understanding that it is a business. You are working in a business that has business drivers behind it, and you're working for businesses that have business drivers behind it. So, time frames, decisions, projects that change and shift, that need to be able to show their return on investment. All of those things are critical things that have to be built into the work that a creative person is working on. And they need to, I think, learn and absorb some of that as much as they can, because it is fundamental to what they're doing. It's not just about producing beautiful creative work. And that is a shift, and it's a shift for anybody, but it's really a big, important one to be able to get your head around, I think, in the first few months of coming into an agency.
Absolutely. The integrated way of working, in your case, it's within a design team or a creative team. In our case, it's with a campaign team. Our designer are part of the campaign team, where the campaign managers are going to come up with some of the strategy, because they know what's going to work on the platform that they're actually going to advertise on. So the designer team needs to fit in that and bring their own knowledge to the table. The person writing a copy, because copy is fundamental in a lot of the digital advertising, is also going to bring something to the table. So in our case, it's really an integrated way, not just a creative way, but with all the different facets.
That's right, and I think that's about also the mechanics of an agency, how it works, that there is different structures and different processes and different inputs, as you said. Our strategists will be the first thing that happens, and they will write the brand strategy, which will then inform the creative brief that the creative will then get to work on, and then that goes into another process. So understanding the mechanics of how it all works and where you fit into that is really critical. And the other side of it is that you are going to work on things that don't really interest you. In what we do, we're doing brand ID, developing a new brand ID or a new brand or a rebrand. That's a fantastic thing, and creatives love working on that, because it's thinking time and it's not fast paced, and you get to think big and translate that. But then sometimes you have to do some things that are not as exciting, that drop out of that. You know, when you're producing some corporate brochures or annual reports or things like that, they might not be as exciting or interesting, and they might be a little bit more tedious in a sense, but that is all part of it, because again, that's what the client needs for their business.
Absolutely. You need to go back to that frame that you can be as creative as you want. It's all about serving the goal of your client, which ultimately is either more sales or, you know, better brand awareness, better messaging, but it is about serving them.
That's right.
Always.
Always, exactly.
Do you feel, I mean, I've been talking a bit, you know, obviously of my area, which is the digital aspect. And it's great to hear
great. I'm
about
learning.
branding.
I love it.
Same. It's like, oh, how different is that? Actually, do you feel there's a lot of difference between what I'm going to call traditional advertising versus digital? And do you think that technology overall has changed the way we design?
Oh, that's a great question. The
Big
second
one.
part of that question, I think yes and yes, and no and no. So I would say that the fundamentals of design still stay the same no matter how they're delivered, but you have to be thinking about where they're going to be applied. And so, and that comes down to the briefing from the client. So it is rare nowadays for a client not to say to us when we're developing a brand strategy that the first lot of assets will be a website and social media templates. So, you have to have that in mind, and that's how it's going to be applied. That is different than if you're doing an out-of-home big billboard or whatever that might be, or a print. The digital focus definitely is the majority of everything. And sometimes we have a scenario where we'll have people that have been really working in that area and applying everything digitally, and then we have to do a massive big print corporate brochure, and sometimes we go, some of those understanding of print skills are lost. So I do, but the fundamentals of design, the fundamentals of creativity and of creating a great brand or a brand campaign are still the same, I think, no matter what. It's just how you apply them, the tools that you use, the different ways that they can be rolled out. With the work that we do, it's much more we're not a traditional advertising agency, although we do that. We're a brand agency, so our work is longer term, it's more strategic, it's again big ideas that found it, so none of that changes no matter how it's applied. And we will have a longer time to work on it, and the brand has to be in market for a very long time. So that underpins everything, but of course then it will be taken by the client or another agency and applied in a different way, and if it can't translate, you've got a massive problem.
Absolutely. I guess branding really is like the foundation upon which you're going to build everything else. But the brand needs to be flexible enough to allow to reflect on different type of platforms.
Absolutely. And I've been, in fact, in one of my previous roles, client sides, where we've created a brand in a time where digital wasn't such a big proportion of what you did, and then over the years we've realised that the logo itself or the brand ID actually isn't working on a digital format, so then we've had to go back and have it refreshed for that. And so you absolutely have to think of the practicalities of where that brand is going to be applied, and how it's going to be used. Otherwise, it's going to be running problems.
Absolutely, and it's something we have quite often where we don't always have clients who had invested in their brand because it hasn't been part of their journey just yet. Or they're a fairly recent startup or whatever it is. And very often we do notice that the brand that they have, which works great for their day-to-day, doesn't necessarily translate well into digital, whether it is the logo or the color palette, because obviously digital requires different colors, quite punchy, it needs to grab attention really quickly. So and for digital as well, because of the way we engage with digital medium, everything is so fast. You need to grab attention within a split second in an oversaturated environment. So your colors tend to be a bit more bright. Typography is so important and so underrated. Lots of people tend to think that typography is great on print, but actually on digital you need to be so smart about it, because you can't, you're limited in the way you engage. It's not like you've got the tactile perception, or you can move the format around, bring it closer to you. It's a screen, it's quite distantiated, so you need to have a font that is striking, easily readable,
Yes.
but that still connect you to emotions and
That's
to a
right.
brand and still
To
tell
the
a story
brand.
with it. It's like, it's back to the brand.
Yeah.
So it's all these elements that really need to be taken into consideration.
Yes.
And with digital, again, a lot of what we do is volume based. Because of the way platforms work, you need to have fresh content very, very regularly.
Yes, yeah.
So the challenge is to be able to create visuals that are always on brand, but that are diverse enough to be able to illustrate a campaign over time, but in a multitude of ads.
Yes, yeah.
And that is very interesting to us. You know, when we were talking about analytics and data earlier, the beauty of it as well in digital compared to, I guess, more traditional advertising is that we use strategy as well. When we've got a great branding agency to work with, we definitely tap on that. When there's none of that, we actually use obviously our interaction with the client and our knowledge to come up with a strategy specifically, you know, for a particular campaign or for the digital endeavor. And that's the backbone. But then we can translate that in a variety of visuals, I guess, and copy, and we can test that. We can run several ads, you know, they can be built very quickly, and we can run several ads at the same time and within a week see what works and what doesn't.
Yes.
Which then is going to inform the rest of the campaign, because
That's
we go like, okay, these two are pivotal. Let's, you know, do a lot of variation of those.
Yes.
And so we can continue for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And lots of declinations. So it's a completely different design approach on that sense, where it's not so much about a huge planning phase, but much more, I guess, you bounce.
Yes,
You
the
adapt, you bounce, you adjust,
Yes,
and you get, you know, interactive results, interactive feedback.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think what we're both sort of saying is the fundamentals are there.
Yes.
But the execution, the application changes.
Absolutely.
And so if we're developing a good brand, a really strong brand, we have to make sure that the obviously strategy is right, and that the design and the visuals and, you know, the copy, everything, the tone of voice, the colours can roll through on all different mediums, which could be anything from a brochure, a billboard, proposal, either, you know, digital, online, or in hard copy and digital, you know, execution. So that's what we will always have in our mind, even if we're not necessarily doing all the detail of the digital campaign executions, which would be with an agency of yours. So one of the things that often happens is that we will have a web development company that will refer a client to us because they want to invest quite a bit of money in a new website, for example, and it might be, you know, quite sophisticated website and a lot of back-end development work, and they will often make a recommendation that the client needs to look at their brand, because, and I think that's a really sensible thing to do, because if the agency is saying, you know, look, we feel that there needs to be some work done here, I think that's a great recommendation to the client, because they are going to be spending potentially a lot of money and making a big investment in their website, and having the brand right is really critical.
Absolutely. So you can have that consistency, as you said, you know, of voice and colours and everything. Have that consistency across every platform, every channel.
Yes, yeah. So they go hand in hand. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love branding.
Yes,
I've got to say.
Great. So do we.
So, with all of that we've said, would you have any particular advice for, you know, aspiring designers applying, or not even just aspiring designers, I guess, applying for a role in a creative agency? What would be your top tips?
My top tips, I think, look, I mean, the basics, again, fundamentals of applying for a job, no matter what. Learn about the agency, you know, find out as much as you can about them, so that you know where they fit in the landscape. And you and I have talked about that previously, about the understanding the fullness of the landscape and all the different things that agencies do. And I know that you know, can't be the full bottle on that, but find out as much as you can, so that when you're talking to that agency, you understand where they fit, and ask questions, even in an interview, or, you know, when you get get the opportunity to do that. Show, in our case, we often want people to send in portfolios. Not often, we do. That's really important. So the portfolio needs to be strong. It needs to show who you are and the type of work you make and the way that you think. But one of the things that we will say is don't try and be too cool or overbake
too trendy.
Yeah, I mean, I always refer to the glitter, don't use glitter examples, or years ago you would know this, where people used to send in hard copy resumes or they'd send you invitations to things and everyone was trying to make something stand out and be something different. And for a while there, people would load glitter into their envelopes thinking that was great, and you'd open it up and suddenly glitter would go all over you, and it was like...
And they stay with you for 3 weeks, but it's not the sort of long-lasting message you want to leave.
It is exactly right. It was like, please avoid the glitter. I know it seems like a good idea at the time, but it has the opposite effect. And the same with portfolios. And I would say, if you're going to a digital agency or you're going to a branding agency, try and include some work that you've done.
Absolutely.
That is, brand work or digital work. If you haven't, be upfront about that and just say, and again, show that wonder. I'd love to find out more. It's a space I'm interested in. But if you've got examples, then put them in there.
Well, and I was even about to say, if you haven't done any, but you're really keen on applying a digital agency, nothing prevents you from, doing a dummy. You just, even with an existing brand, just disclose it on the application. This is not a real project I've worked on, but this is what I would have done with this brand on a Facebook ads or hypothetical campaign, because it shows that you're putting yourself in that perspective and in that frame. As a digital agency, even though I love looking at portfolios and really appreciate, all the creative input, I'm going to find it very difficult to see how good of a digital designer you are if all I see are billboards, cafe menus, and logos.
Yes.
It's great, it looks great, but how does that translate in my field?
Yes, that's right.
So don't hesitate to create fake ones. Just disclose it, but just to show your skill. And what you were saying about, it's the same thing across an industry when it comes to applying for a role. Investigates the company you're applying for and all of that. I put it in the context that you're applying for a role in a marketing agency, advertising agency, branding agency. Your day-to-day is all about, it is going to be about understanding a brief and delivering something based on that brief. Your job ad, the one that you read and you're applying to, this is your brief.
Yes.
Your prospective employer is your client.
Yes.
Work it as a design submission. Look at the angles. What are the end goals? What sort of voice are they using? What are their value? What is transpired from their brand? How I'm going to package that up to them. It doesn't mean you have to do a different portfolio every time. It doesn't need to, it doesn't have to be extremely personal, but you can tweak it. You can angle it so the recipient is like, actually, this fills my needs.
That's right. They've thought about it. I totally agree. I mean, you're not expecting someone to spend hours and hours and hours on creating new work, but you want to tweak it and tailor it. And again, if you go back to many years ago, and it was still actually many years, it still happens now all of the time, with other roles that you're advertising, the sending a form letter in that says to who it may concern, or dear sir, madam, when you have clearly put the person's name and the job title in the job ad. For me, automatic delete. I won't even look at it, because what that tells me is you haven't read the ad, you haven't thought about who you're applying to, and therefore, if that's how you behave when you're applying for a role, how will you be in responding to a client's brief?
Absolutely. It's always about that emotional connection. I mean, when you create a design, it's about the emotional connection you're going to create in the person viewing it. It is kind of similar with an employer, as in you want to try to create a specific relationship with that employer. We receive hundreds of applications. If there's one that's addressed to my agency's name, possibly my name, just Google it.
Yes, that's right. It's all there on the website.
Google, it's so easy to find on the website. Exactly. Most of the time, it's actually at the end of my job on the job description.
It's on the job ad. Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
If I list a value, if I list a job description, you've got so much material to pick, choose, and articulate in the letter.
Yeah.
You know, like, use that.
That's
it's
right.
really valuable. And attention to detail, for me, it's a massive one.
Yes, that is important.
Typos is a big thing.
Well,
in a
that's
design
right.
in a design application,
Yes,
typo is a big thing.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And the other thing, again, it should go without saying, is present your best work as well, because what you want to see when you're seeing a lot of portfolios or a lot of applications for whatever job, but you're seeing a lot of portfolios, you want to see the ones that are really standing out, the best work. And sometimes, you know, you will be looking at 100, 200 ads, so applications, so that you really need a way to filter those. The other thing I would say is that we really want to understand more about the person, so we want to know what fires you, what your passions are outside of work. You know, the people that tell us a bit about it's, you know, not just what really gets you going with the world, because again, we're interested in people who wonder and people who are creative and engage with the world. So more about the person and their personality, and knowing what they do outside of work, or what interests them, or what their thinking is a great thing, particularly for a creative person, because it's that broader view and broader understanding of the world and of humans and of community that we want to get a bit of a read on when we're going to ask people to come in for an interview and explore that more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a level of candor, you know, being candid, that's very important. In both ways, actually, I think it's important from the employer's perspective as well, to be very transparent about who you are and who you're not. And that's true at the time of the application, but at the interview time even more so, where you do not want, as an employee or prospective employee, to apply for a role that's not going to be a right fit for you from a cultural perspective. And that's not going to work for you, that's not going to work for the employer, it's going to create friction. Nobody wants that. You want to find a workplace that aligns with you and your core values, so you can flourish. And we as employer want to have that as well. Way less management.
That's right.
Much more happiness at work. Win-win. It's all about the win-win. And I think you can only get that if you're candid about who you are.
I agree. And that cultural fit is the most critical thing. And so every recruitment process you go through, you're looking for the best cultural fit with your business.
Absolutely. Skills can be taught and refined. Culture can be changed.
That's right. And hard skills are not the only thing. They are critical too. But we know, and again, looking at the broad workplace and what globally we need, those bigger thinking skills and those people skills are a critical, component of what workplaces need.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Nat.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time, your perspective.
Yeah, it's been lovely. Thank you. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Thanks. Well, it has been for me as well. So
great.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. As the other would say, subscribe. Oh, this way. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel. Give us a like. Lots more content coming. Thank you.